Alright guys, Red here. Welcome to Red Resort. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Origin 300 series. We're going to compare all the variants and see some of their strengths and weaknesses, and do a little tour/review along the way. Before we do that, I'd like to say a quick thank you to the channel members, Nils Gerdes and Spacecraft. If you know anyone looking to get into Star Citizen, please use one of the referral codes on screen now. If you would like to get your referral code displayed, or get a few extra entries into the giveaways we do here on the channel, please do consider becoming a member or a Patreon. With all that out the way, let's begin. By the 4th decade of the 29th century, Origin Jumpworks had cemented their reputation as a major player in the burgeoning personal spacecraft industry, with several lines of accessible, luxury-orientated spacecraft that offered distinct alternatives to the output of its contemporary rivals. Origin designs belied the company's industrial beginnings, and largely focused on smaller crewed and single-seat vessels, each reinforcing the sense that every individual piece was as carefully considered as those of a classic timepiece. Origin was incorporated in the mid-28th century. For their first decade, the company produced high-quality fusion engines used by the UEE military and mounted on the ostentatious Robert Space Industries and Aegis Dynamics star yachts available to the public. With the need for personal spacecraft growing exponentially, Origin moved to compete with the companies they initially supplied. Within 10 years, the company was producing a top 5 selling mid-scale composite transport, and within 50, their well-paying customer base was neck and neck with RSI for gross profits in the manufactured spacecraft field. Origin premiered their initial 200 and 300 lines of personal ships in 2899, and has held strong second in that market ever since. In 2897, the first hand-machined Origin 300 prototype took flight at Frankfurt Cosmodrome. The first flight was an enormous success from a technical standpoint. The prototype completed 9 Earth orbits without a hitch. Additional early tests rapidly checked off the standard first flight objectives, including the Earth-Luna slingshot and the initial quantum to Io. Inside 6 months, 301 was ready to perform first jump tests in real space. However, a complete materials manifest of the current metals, alloys and components indicated that the end retail cost of the ship would be over 15 times that of an Aurora. The company's board, previously content to let Lang work without restrictions, stepped in. For the next 14 months, the factions of the company fought a vicious internal battle over the 300's production model, with a chain of executives resigning in defiance of Lang's obstinance. Spacecraft designers and outside consultants were tasked with determining how to turn a perfect, expensive prototype into a working production model without sacrificing the soul of the machine. The result of these reworkings was a spacecraft with a lower price, roughly 4 times that of an Aurora. On the 18th of December 2899, the 300i premiered at a special reveal ceremony at Baikonur to incredible acclaim. The combination of its stunning lines and incredible performance won over audiences immediately. The Origin 300 quickly became the look of popular spaceflight, a symbol of success and a goal for everyone setting out into the galaxy. Each variant in the 300 series is reasonably capable all round, and performs well for a variety of tasks that can be found in the verse. On top of that, most have a reasonably unique feature that sets it apart from its other variants. The variants are the 300i, the 315p, the 325A and the 350R. With all that out the way, let's get down to the hangar and review some ships. This is the 300i, and we will treat this as the default version. I will point out any differences between the variants as we go, so unless I highlight a feature specifically, you should be safe to assume that it's the exact same as this version. First, let's talk about some similarities. This, in my humble opinion, is the best looking ship in the game. It's always been a stable friend of mine, so I'm going to try and temper my biases a little bit here, but I really love this design. It's almost arrogant in its sleekness, so smooth yet retaining nice angles, and definitely tickling those sports car parts of the brain. Their bodies are all essentially the same with the exception of the R, which has a few modified parts which I'll go over, but the body sizes are identical across all models. The first major difference with the 300i is obviously the paint job. The white and black really serves this ship well, and is by far my preferred skin out of the 4 standard loadouts. The next pretty obvious difference is the loadout itself. The 300i comes with 3 size 3 hardpoints, 1 on the nose and 1 under each wing. Now, as of 323, these will be all manual gimbal enabled, which means you will be able to track your targets with your look controls within a certain cone from the front of your ship, if you choose to enable that function. 3 size 3 is actually pretty decent and will have you certainly able to defend yourself or do bounties, etc. There's also a size 2 missile rack under each wing as well, allowing you to equip a total of 2 size 2 missiles or 4 size 1s, or a combination of both. Then we have these headlights, and again, you aren't just getting some lights bolted to your ship for functional reasons. These lights, as well as being highly functional, actually accent the design, and seeing these piercing out of the stormy fog on the dark side of some moon as you make your way back to your ship definitely gives you a nice little sense of comfort, like you're nearly home and safe, if that makes sense. But that could just be me. There's also a bit of a predatory aesthetic to the ship as well. It exudes this presence that it could just effortlessly leave you choking on its dust while flying off into the sunset sipping champagne. Personally, I just love it. Coming around the side, we are treated to this massive part winglet, part spoiler sort of combo that definitely adds to the whole high performance look of the craft. A slightly over the top, almost extravagant flourish of character design that pretty much seals the deal from nose to tail. And on top we can see what looks like an air intake of some sort, maybe even the hydrogen fuel scoop in fact, which can refuel the hydrogen tanks completely in around 8,000 seconds. It's definitely not the fastest, but it's not the slowest either, and the only other model with an active fuel scoop is the 315P, but all models have this air intake structure along the spine, which, let's face it, definitely sells the coolness factor. And all models are the same with the exception of the 350R, which is slightly different, but I'll show you that when we get to it. As we start to come round the back, we can see how this whole spoiler part of the ship all tapers to an end, and I must say, it just looks awesome from any angle really. The thrusters are pretty unique as well on the 300 series, and it definitely looks the part and fits well with this sort of multiple slot design. The 350R is the only one that changes slightly from this, which again we'll see later. As we come underneath, we have the cargo bay fitted into the belly. Such a lovely little feature this, you can get a whole 8 SCU in there. The animation is pretty cool as well. The internal inventory capacity for the 300i is also 8 SCU, but this is all likely to change with 323, so keep an eye on the comments for any changes. These cargo bays change in capacity for every model, with the 325A and the 350R being the smallest at 4 SCU. The landing gear is of the wheel variety, and I mean, there's nothing particularly of note here. They are well designed, as is always the case with CIG, but nothing particularly stand out. The right side of the ship is pretty much identical, apart from missing the door, so let's just take a look inside. The door here is a nice big chunky thing, but still manages to look and sound pretty high end, and it's pretty unique in the way it slides off to one side, and it has a kind of satisfaction factor as well, as it closes perfectly flush with the body of the ship again. The ladder is pretty cool as well, but maybe just a bit basic in comparison. Like the landing gear really, there's no sense that this is the Rolls Royce of ladders. It's just functional. Which, to be fair, is probably what you want from ladders and landing gear, so moving on. Once we're inside, we're treated to a very well put together interior. We have these blue strip lights running the length of the place, blending into the nice white facings, and it's all very polished, and you can tell there's been a lot of attention to detail went into this. We have a nice carpet, and the materials that make up the stairs and all these flush parts They're all very impressive and really just nicely set things off. I wouldn't say it's cosy, it's a bit too clean for that, but it's certainly comfortable. There's a toilet, which is nice to have, no shower, but the fact they even got this in here is pretty impressive, to be honest. An extinguisher for the upcoming gameplay involving that. Up here we have a pretty generous little kitchen area with a sink, there's a small fridge down here, and everything is nicely finished with this wood panelling, which is a very nice little touch. The only small thing I would say is that this colour doesn't match this colour, which is weird. I suppose I'm definitely nitpicking at this point. In general, it's beautiful top to bottom. And talking about the top, we have this massive skylight running the length of the back cabin, which is pretty sweet, and it lets more light in here, opening up the space even more. There's a storage locker here which currently has 0.65 SCU space in there. There's some nice displays for these glasses which seem to defy inertia somehow, and a weapons locker here for your medium-sized weapons. Over here we have a bed, and it's pretty basic looking. It does pop out a bit when you lie down on it, and the 300i, the 315p and the 325A all have this same layout, with the exception being the 350R, which only has a bed and a toilet, with a bit of a different layout as well. I'm guessing you've got to get rid of some of that weight for the racing version. Now, if you buy any of the 300 series ships with real money or upgrade to them, there is an option in the store to completely customize your ship. That means most things: the paint, the facings, the bed sheets, the steering yoke and pilot's chair and stuff. And you can also buy various gadgets for scattering around the place. After we've seen all the ships, I do intend to go through this process to show you what it's like, because although you have to pay a bit extra, it is one of the reasons that I love this ship as much as I do. Back in here, one of the downsides you've probably noticed is that there's no component access, either from outside or in. I'm not sure what the plan is with that, but it is a little disappointing. As it stands, on all variants you get 2 size 2 shields, 1 size 1 power plant, 2 size 1 coolers, and a size 1 quantum drive. If we come over to the cockpit now, first off we can see that the pilot's chair is white with black leather, it looks like, and on the back we have some of that nice wood finish as well. On the 350R you actually get a different seat and yoke, which are a lot more racing themed. When we get in the seat, we can see we have this really open canopy that is totally unobstructed. This gives good visibility above and only gets cut off at about 90 degrees to the sides, and below as well obviously. Left and right we have a few panels for controlling doors, exit seat. Under the chair we have an eject. On the right we have engines, flight ready. And all through the cockpit we have this nice wood panelling again, finishing everything off really well. Let's fire her up and see how she sounds.
Origin Jumpworks at your service. Core system operational. Engines active.
As you'd half expect, turning the engines on is pretty sleek and quiet. This isn't any of that thrown together Drake diesel engine stuff. This is that handcrafted precision engineering you're hearing. There are 4 MFDs that are totally holographic, which helps keep this dash as unobtrusive as possible and works well with the Origin aesthetic. They are pretty well placed as well, allowing a decent range of information to be gleaned without moving your head too much. Taking off, we can get a good look at the landing gear animations. The description for the 300i reads, "The 300i is a luxury single-seater starter ship that is capable of filling almost any role in the galaxy. It is the base model of the 300 series, so as you can probably tell, the 300i comes in sort of middle of the road out of all the versions. It's touted as the luxury version, but to be honest, the 315 and 325 are identical on the inside, besides the colour scheme and facings. It does have the nicest paint job as standard to my eyes. Because it can carry 8 SCU of cargo coupled with the abundant interior storage, this could make for a really nice ship for running some daily tasks in. It can haul a decent amount of loot if you're running bunkers or caves and the like. Obviously it would be perfect for doing deliveries or retrieval ops, Also, given its fairly decent weapons package, it can definitely hit back hard when the need arises. So definitely a consideration for PvE bounties and mercenary work. Be a great little ship for doing some drug smuggling and the like, maybe for visiting Jumptown or for moving the odd occasional high value cargo or salvage. Also, if you ever want to move passengers around and you're not sure how trustworthy they are, or maybe they are prisoners you captured, you can stick them in the cargo bay where you can transport them pretty securely. Just a thought. Next up is the 315p. Not a lot's changed here, but the first thing we notice is the standard grey and yellow paint. It's not really my cup of tea, but it's still pretty cool. We also have this on the front. The 300i comes with only 2 size 3 weapons and 2 size 2 missile ports. So the front one here is a tractor beam. And it's not like a remote tractor beam where you can enter it. You control it from the cockpit using your loot controls, which is a bit weird, but it means you can move stuff around in space using your whole ship. So in a lot of ways, it's actually a lot handier than if you were just locked into a turret screen and couldn't fly. And it's pretty cool. The range is about 600 meters, which is massive. And you basically jump between gimbal modes to flick between moving the target or moving the ship. Coming around the side, we have pretty much an identical profile to the 300i. Underneath, however, we have the cargo bays, which will now house 12 SCU of cargo. There's now a forward and rear cargo bay, where the rear takes 4 and the front takes 8. The internal storage of the 315 is 12 SCU as well. But again, check the pinned comments to see if that's still true. As this is an exploration vessel, we can expect down the road for the scanning package to be better than the other variants. It also has an absolutely massive fuel tank, coming out at just over 1 million for hydrogen, where the largest of the other variants is around 150,000. It has a decent boosted quantum capacity as well, with 830 over the next closest, which is the 300i with 680. And remember, it has the active fuel scoop as well, so it's actually really well equipped for long exploration when that sort of gameplay comes in. Another consideration is that because of the slightly bigger quantum fuel tank, you can afford to take a slightly faster quantum drive than the standard Atlas that most players opt for. Putting a burst QT drive in will shave off around about a whole minute from Microtech to ArcCore over the Atlas drive. Inside, everything is just the same, other than now we have a really nice brushed metal facing around the cabin areas, and there's no complaints here. The cockpit is nicely finished as well, in the same sort of style, but apart from that, everything is identical as far as I can tell. The tractor beam works by pressing the same button that activates the salvage mode. You put the ship into manual gimbal mode, and then it will track wherever you move your mouse or head. Obviously though, you won't be using this to tractor cargo aboard your own loading bay, which is a bit strange to be honest, but it does have its uses. If you need something tractored over a longer distance from one ship to another, and you'd rather your player wasn't exposed to attack or from the elements, it's actually pretty handy to have this non-turret configuration. Definitely a weird one, but I can see it having some very special use cases with cargo management going forward. And that really suits this ship perfectly. It really helps bolster the functionality overall. We basically have a ship now that not only stands out for its exploration and long-range capabilities, but it's also the cargo variant of the group and will be handy for loading and unloading bigger ships as well. On top of that, it will do everything we said the 300i could do. Most jobs other than salvage or mining really, and even then it might be handy for swapping out mining bags or emptying out the cargo holds of salvageable derelicts. It would only be less useful in the bounty hunting sense, but even then it's still reasonably capable, even at the loss of the third weapon. And I hate to say it because my favourite has always been the 325A, but this one has definitely grown on me considerably whilst making this video. If combat wasn't a part of my routine at all, then this definitely would be the variant I'd choose. The description reads, the Origin 315P is the exploration variant of the 300 series, featuring a more robust power plant and a custom scanning package exclusively designed by Chimera Communications. That power plant they are referring to is a stealth grade A slipstream, by the way, that comes as standard, which could save you a few pennies on your upgrade path. Right, onto the 325A. Again, the most prominent difference is the paint. This time we've got a grey and red colour scheme. It looks pretty nice, and it does a really good job of accenting the shape of the ship really well. Also, again though, I'm not the biggest fan, and I really wish they would put some more default skins into the game. The other major difference is the weapons. As this is the combat version, we now see 2 size 3 hardpoints under the wings and a size 4 on the nose. As well as that, we have 2 size 3 missile mounts, which will fire 2 size 2 missiles each, or 4 size 1s each. And if we look under here, there is a size locked size 3 mount that will fire 4 size 3 missiles as well, making this small and pretty luxurious ship into quite the force to be reckoned with. Underneath we have the cargo bay again, this time with a 4 SCU capacity. The internal storage is also 4 SCU, and if that changes I'll pin it in the comments. There's also no fuel intake on the 325A. Other than that, everything else is essentially the same on the outside. So let's have a look at the interior. So in here we have the exterior theme of the red played out across the facings. And if it wasn't for the blue lights, this might be okay, but as it is, I do struggle with the default scheme for the 325A a little bit. It honestly just doesn't sit right with me at all. Even looks a bit cheap, to be honest. Apart from that though, it's as nice in here as it is in the rest. It's got all the same bits and bobs, same storage space and stuff, as well as the skylight. The cockpit is also afflicted with the glossy red, unfortunately, but it's otherwise the same. What would you use this version for? Blowing things up mainly. Obviously you're better defended and can perform PvE bounties and the like a lot more efficiently than with other versions. Plus you've still got a little bit of cargo room for looting anything you find. To be honest, I find this to be the best run around in the game. It's been my own personal daily driver for a couple of years now, and the only thing I really miss is the inability to load a small vehicle now and then, which none of the 300 series support. Now, I don't want to oversell the ship's combat capability here. As it stands, it's excellent for PvE, but it does fall quite short in most PvP scenarios. Something to keep in mind, it's basically just too easy to hit due to its size, and although it's fast, it will get worked over pretty easily by pretty much all the light fighters in the game in a PvP scenario. Perhaps that will change with 323 and master modes, so definitely check the pinned. As well as the boost to combat, obviously the 325 can perform all the same jobs in the verse with great ease. And as I mentioned before, you can even store prisoners or injured personnel in the cargo bay. The description reads, the Origin 325A is the combat variant of the 300 series. It features an advanced weapon payload, as well as a custom targeting system designed specially for the 325A by Wills Up. And what they're referring to there is that it is expected to come with a military grade A radar. So hopefully that'll be another little bonus down the road. Okay, so the last in the series is the 350R. This variant is a designated racing ship. It has a stunning black and yellow paint job, which is just perfect for its role in my opinion. Helps it to go faster, I've heard. It's also got a splash here and there of these little decals, sort of like racing sponsors. We've got a couple of these little extra go fast fins on either side. The scoop up top has had a redesign and is now 2 separate ports instead of the one big one. And surprisingly, for a racing ship, a lot of the stuff from the other variants is still in here. We have 3 size 3 guns on the usual manual gimbals, still got the 2 size 2 missile mounts as well. We've even still got the little cargo bay which will hold 4 SCU and the 4 SCU of internal inventory. Coming round the back, the main thruster ports have had a bit of a redesign. Nothing crazy, but there's more slots here than usual, and there's another 2 little fins on the top there as well. I mean, it's not much, but if you're looking for the slickest, fastest version, then this ship is definitely it. Inside, things are a bit different again. Gone are the kitchen and bed combo with the corridor down the middle. Now we just have a simple bed right in the centre. Obviously this means there's no gun rack or additional 6.5 SCU of storage locker as well, but we did keep the toilet and extinguisher. The facings are now all this really cool carbon fibre look. That works great with the blue lighting. Coming to the cockpit, we can see the seat has changed to a sportier version, something more like a bucket seat found in a racing car. The cockpit has been fleshed out with the carbon fibre look as well, which, although it matches and is still pretty cool, I find at this point it's starting to become just a wee bit too much in here. Could be doing with a bit more plain panelling here and there, just to break things up, but obviously that's below even a minor gripe. The yoke has also changed into this pretty nifty sporty edition, so there's some very nice touches in here that help to bring out that racing flavour, and it works really well. Now the use cases for all the variants, as you've probably noticed, are pretty varied and overlap a lot. They are all very capable ships at performing the majority of tasks you can find in your Mobiglass. This one basically just goes faster, so as well as the obvious racing advantage, it would make for a good interceptor perhaps, or a rescue ship or taxi, on top of the general tasks the 300 series can already perform, although its health pool is really low, so do keep that in mind. It is a pretty fragile thing compared to the other ships. Okay, let's quickly go over the customization options that are available if you either buy the ship with real money or upgrade to it through the store. On your hangar page, you should see an option like this saying Customize. Inside, we've got a lot of options to choose from. We can see a preview on the left as you click on options. Here we have the default. This is Scarlet, Citron, Electric Blue, Monarch, Metallic Blue, Obsidian, Sterling, and Moonlight, which is essentially as close to white as you're gonna get. Now at various points throughout my time with Star Citizen, I've tried most of these out, and this is my favourite, as it goes well with the slight blue tint to the headlights, as well as the interior blue strip lights, but obviously your choice will be your own. You can see that some of the options are standard and some are premium. It's only the premium options that will cost you any money, and each one is around about a couple of pound, sometimes not even that. In the cockpit you can choose between the wood finish, gloss red, aluminium, carbon fibre, gloss blue, carbon fibre yellow, and gloss yellow. I'm a big fan of the brushed aluminium look. For the yoke you can choose between the standard model, which does have a little strip of the cockpit colour within it, or the sports model. The seat next, the standard model can be black, brown or white leather, and then the same colours apply to the sports model. This is the back of the standard model where we can choose a finish, the aluminium, wood, red, carbon, blue, yellow and carbon yellow again. And here are the same colours applied on the back of the sports model. We're going to go for the standard model I think, as I don't like the carbon on the sporty one. And we're going to take the white leather and the aluminium finish again. On to the bed next, where we've got Sonata Grey, Sonata White and Grey, Lullaby Grey, Lullaby White and Grey, Nocturne Grey, and Nocturne White and Grey. I'm thinking Nocturne Grey. Next up, there's a bunch of loadout packages you can choose from. I don't usually bother with these, as there's normally a few things I'd change in each one, so I don't really see the point. The last one comes with a bunch of laser cannons though, which is a bit tempting, but I think I'd rather do them in game where I can get better components. Up to you of course. Last up is the decorations. We have the coffee maker, the food maker, the HOTAS sound system, a curved metal picture frame, and a clock. I'm just going to grab all of these so you can see them, as I feel they really go a long way to livening the place up. As you can see, for everything we've put in there, it's came to about £11, which is probably around $14–15. Let's grab this and jump back into the game and see how it looks. And here she is. This is basically my default layout for the 325A. I've got my Omni-Sky laser cannons on there now as well. On the inside we can see it all makes actually quite a big difference. It's unfortunate we have to pay extra for the privilege, but at least there is some way to get rid of that red plastic looking stuff that was here before. We could get ourselves a coffee, pretend that these tunes work, pretend that we're cooking stuff. I've heard the tortoise is really nice in here. The seat in the cockpit now has all this polished aluminium on it. Overall, I'd say I'm a pretty happy citizen with how this turned out. So first of all, this video is being released on the cusp of 3.23 and Master modes. As things currently stand in 3.23, all these ships have the exact same movement profile. The hope is that as they get tuned, they will fall in a way similar to how they perform against each other and other ships in 3.22, if that makes sense. Now this won't be exactly the same. There are some fundamental changes being made to the sphere of movement, making things more focused on forward movement in particular. We're still going to focus on how they perform in 3.22 in the hopes that that gives us a relative benchmark for going into 3.23. I think we can expect the 350 to be the fastest, and for the rest of them to fall pretty much into the places that they are right now. The handling of the 300 series is a bit hit and miss, to be honest. You can get some really nice turning speed in space along all axis, and you shouldn't have any trouble there at all. Its top speeds are across the board insanely good. Even in atmosphere, it just cuts right through and feels efficient and powerful. As usual though, in atmosphere your yaw will be dampened severely, meaning to turn you will have to rely on roll and pitch just like you would in a modern jet. Just like with the Avenger Titan, this can have some negative effects. The problem with the Titan was that its roll was very slow, so you couldn't pop into those turns. This doesn't have this problem. Its main problem seems to be inertia. I feel like I have to slow down a lot more going into corners or use a lot more thrust to get me around them, which would make sense since I'm in a bigger ship, both in terms of dimensions and mass. It's not like the ship doesn't have the power to make the corrections though, and what it loses on the corners it makes up for on the straights. There are subtle variations between the variants as well, but the general rule seems to be the 350R is the fastest for roll, pitch, yaw, SCM speed and top speed by quite a fair whack. That's followed by the 325A, then the 315P, then lastly the 300I. And those last three are all grouped quite closely together, with not much difference between them, whereas the 350R is quite a bit far out in front. In my opinion, for all the variants, given how well they are equipped, the luxury aspect and fittings, the cargo space, etc., the ship moves exceptionally well. If you're just doing some A to Bs, some deliveries or pickups or bunkers, or a lot of the other daily driver type missions, the speed you can get down to surface and back out again is unreal, to be honest. For the more technical stuff that actually rely on manoeuvring, I'd say low flying and stuff like that should be fine, but I'd be a bit hesitant on the canyon running and things. But, you know, it could just be like everything else. The more time you spend doing it, the more you adapt to the intricacies of the craft. And I've seen guys absolutely whip this thing around racetracks no problem. So it could just be an experience deficit on my part. In fact, I'm pretty certain it is. It feels big for a racer, and that would take a fair bit getting used to. But the payoff would be a lot more power on those straights. So I'd maybe shop around for a bit more of an experienced player if buying this strictly for racing. I get the feeling it would excel on particular tracks and possibly not being so great on others. But on the racetracks I did struggle to keep her under control a lot of the time. So for combat, somehow even though most variants are reasonably well armed, the 300 series never seems to give you the impression that combat is its main focus. It's like it's a side job. It's got the fangs if it needs them, but it's somehow managed to not make that fact its whole character. Like the Titan for example. It gives me the immediate impression it's a size 4 gun with some extra ship attached. When I think of the 300 series, my first thought is something about coffee and luxury, then maybe my second thought is about speed and guns, and style. Which is weird because the 325A is an absolute menace with that size 4 and 2 size 3s. With a bit of practice, it's totally possible to do extreme risk targets with the 325A and the 300i. It wasn't exactly easy though. The main problem is that it takes far too long. For that reason, I just wouldn't recommend it at all. But doing up to very high risk targets is doable in a reasonable sort of time frame. Maybe lower again to high risk targets for the 350R and the 315P, but even then I'd be very careful. You're missing a gun on the 315P, and the 350R is literally made of paper. Your shield goes down, you better be using that extra speed to get out of there very, very fast. Again, I should mention, when 323 finally settles into something resembling a stable form, I'll definitely test and post the changes below. Stealth wise, all 4 variants are actually pretty average for their size. The overall radar emission is reasonable, but what gives it away is the cross section for the most part. More than double something like the Hornet Ghost, so I wouldn't be relying on that for the time being either. For PvP, the 325 is about a C tier, so would be in a fair fight with a Titan, a Mustang, a Siulan even, but would lose to a fair chunk of ships that are faster, smaller or better equipped. So not too great, but it does have that very, very high top speed, so really great for getting out of there, if the need arises. So in general then, we find the 300 series to be a very competitive and competent line of ships. Not only can it handle most jobs you can think to throw it at, but it will handle them with grace and look good doing it. Aside from the obvious omission of any components to engineer, there's not a lot of bad things to be said. If you're looking for a smaller ship to explore the version, while simultaneously being able to handle some combat and a wide range of other jobs, this is definitely worth considering. If I had to choose one variant that I feel would be the most all-round and versatile, I probably should pick the 315P. The 12 cargo and the tractor mount definitely give it a lot of points in terms of usefulness. But if you tend to like a bit of PvE combat thrown into the mix, then the 325A is definitely the way to go. That size 4 mount and all those extra missiles, to me at least, seems like a much bigger advantage than 8 extra SCU of cargo. But that will entirely depend on your playstyle. If I had to give a price to performance score in the context of versatility, I'd start at the 300i at the top, which is around 750k, and then work backwards. The 315P would be next at 880,000, then the 325 at 950,000, and then last would be the 350 at 1.6 million for some reason. Bear in mind, if you're watching this in 3.23, these figures will now be around double. We don't know if the economy will shift to match that, or if you'd just be doing twice the work to pay for each ship. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume the latter. Either way, we have seen a glimpse of the price changes, and they maintain the same structure relative to each other, with the 300i being the cheapest at 1.3 million, and the 350R still being outrageously priced at 3.7 million. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend that ever at this point. But there are a few other ships in and around that new 1.5 million price bracket that could perform relatively similar tasks. The Avenger series is all in there, the Nomad is about 1.5 million as well, and for around 2 million you could be into Cutty Black territory, so that's something to consider as well. I'd give the 300i, the 315 and the 325 all about a 7 out of 10, and the 350R about a 5 for price to performance, again solely based on versatility. You could do everything in less style and comfort for a few 100k less by going for the Avenger Titan, for example. For a loadout, we're still waiting to see what engineering will bring, but for now my default will always be all military A grade for that extra robustness in combat. That is overkill though, and you can get away with just the FR66 shields and the Atlas QT drive if you need to save some money. For the 315P, I'd go for the Burst QT drive, as that should give you a faster time, across Stanton at least. Now obviously all of that might change, but if you have any suggestions you'd like to make, or notice any deviation in the stats, please, I'd love to hear them, and we'll try and keep the latest info pinned below going forward. And that's it, folks. That's your comparison and review for the 300 series to the best of my humble knowledge. I do appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. If you have some suggestions for what variants you'd like to see next, please comment them below, and I'll hopefully see you next time. 07 guys.